Welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining me, and welcome to Christy Iwuchukwu's Brilliance TV show. This is where we spotlight the defining moments and accomplishments of the top business leaders, entrepreneurs, unique and most successful individuals. And today I am super excited for my guests to join me today. But first of all, let me tell you what we do at the TV show. This is every Monday at 6 p.m. Pacific time. We bring experts from various various topics that you want to hear about, and I want you to be a part of this community. This show is for you and about you, and this show cannot exist without you. So I invite you to come and join us every Monday 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I also want to remind you about my telesummit coming on 27th of January, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time to 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You know, this is where you get an opportunity to really showcase and spread the news and spread the message about what you have to offer, how you're going to impact and change lives. And it doesn't get any better. So this opportunity is for you. I want you to come and be able to share your message. And I'm going to also put a link at the end of this interview for you to join us Saturday, January 27th, beginning at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Well, that is all on that one. So I am going to talk about what's my guest today. My guest today is coming to us all the way from Illinois. Anthony Cherry Sr. is a financial advisor, recruiting and developing independent agents to service and provide financial planning for middle class. He's a published author of collaborated book, Live Your Best Life. The time is now. Please help me welcome my friend, Anthony Cherry. Anthony?
I hear the hand claps in the background. Hey. Hey, how's everybody doing? And first of all, before I get started, I must give you shout out and blessings, man, for allowing me to be a part of your community. Thank you so much for reaching out to me. I have to let the audience know how we met. We met back in September, late September, back at a Black Belt Speakers Forum in Charlotte,
North Carolina.
North Carolina. And it was amazing. It was a very amazing time. And I remember just sitting there and you approaching me and you asking me, because you were so amazed by the conversation that men were having without watching sports. And you were like, what are you guys over there talking about? And I was just sharing with you how we were sharing about our families, our background, about our lives, and how we wanted to go change lives, and how important that venue through Black Belt Speakers had meant to us, and the different things that had began to challenge us with. And you just approached me and did a Facebook Live on that. So I just want to thank you, Christy, for always reaching out and letting people share their stories. You do such an amazing job. So thank you again, and thank you for having me on this evening's show.
Oh, thank you so much. It really was a joy interacting with you. Like I said, I really enjoyed to see just men alone. You know, women, we know how to network, but it was different to see just men connecting, talking about men issue. And yes, I really appreciated that. So I look forward for the next conference. So welcome, and thank you for the acknowledgement.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
So we're going to get on with this interview because the audience is waiting. They are waiting. So this show is really about you, because you get to share what you know. You get to teach what you know. And that's how our audience get to learn from different experts that I have on the show. How did you come to embrace your genius? How did you come to embrace your brilliance? Oftentimes we hear people when they're already on the mountaintop. We hear them when they're on the mountaintop, but we don't usually get to talk about being in the valley. And it is being in the valley where we learn the greatest lessons. So What was that defining moment for you to get to where you were to where you are now?
Well, there's several stories that are kind of intertwined with me discovering that. One particular story is I was living in Chicago. I'm originally from Chicago, Illinois, and I had moved back from Texas, San Antonio, Texas, to be close to my family and also to be close to my son. So in that move, I had decided to go back to college. So I enrolled into Harold Washington College downtown. And the crazy part about it is I never really showed up for school. I never really attended classes. So what happened was me and my son's mother was deciding on how we were going to continue this relationship. And I decided that it was best that I would be a great father because I didn't make a good boyfriend. I knew that. I knew I didn't make a great boyfriend. So a friend of mine had invited me to go to Western Illinois University to attend an event. And when I got there, I just felt at home. I was like, this is where I can be exposed to the education environment that I needed to be successful. Being in Chicago was not a good fit for me because I had so many distractions. So I went to go apply for school that semester. And one of the things I asked the counselor, I said, listen, what is necessary for me to transfer from Harold Washington College to Western Illinois University in Macomb, Illinois? And he looked at my transcripts, he looked at my grades, and he looked up at me, he says, that'll never happen. And when he said that to me, it was like you just ripped all possibilities of me raising my son in a safe environment from me. And I immediately went upstairs to talk to the provost, and I told the provost, she was in a meeting, and the secretary was like, she's in a meeting. I was like, my tuition doesn't pay for her to be in a meeting. My tuition pays for her to talk to me, and I need to discuss this issue with her right now. So she spoke with me. I told her what the gentleman said. She walked me immediately downstairs, and she told the guy, she says, listen, your job is to help my students be successful and to give them what is necessary for them to win in life. So he sat down with me. He told me what will be necessary for me to transition from Harold Washington University to Western Illinois University. And that began my mindset change. That moment, I decided that no one would ever tell me I could not have what I wanted. It was totally up to me. There were some steps, some precursors that I would have to take care of. There's some details that I would have to take care of before I can ask anyone to give me anything. So I always research what pre-qualifications I needed to have in my life to move to the next level. That's when I began to expose my brilliance. I became the control of my destiny. At that moment, I decided, hey, as a parent, I was going to be in control. As a husband or as in a relationship, I was going to know what was necessary for me to impact that relationship or that environment before I got engaged in it. The next thing that happened to me was in 2004, that same child that I raised by myself ended up being murdered. It was actually December 2004, actually 2005, because it was on New Year's. It was Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, but he passed on New Year's Day. Someone said something to me, and it stuck with me. And what they said to me was, a disobedient child will be murdered in the street. That was the counsel I got in that moment. And I began to think about it. It was like, man, I could not have prevented this from happening. But what I can do is I can make sure that I spend quality time imparting into my kids and letting them know their greatness, because I didn't do a good job with my oldest son. So in that transitioning to being a better father and a better husband, I began to speak. I began to do more affirmation. I began to learn about affirming people, speaking positively, controlling your environment, controlling my temperament. One of my mentors told me something early on in the game. He says, Anthony, there's only two things in life you can control: your attitude and your actions. your attitude and your actions. And when I embraced those two pillars in my life, I knew that I had control over my attitude, and I knew I had control over my actions. And that began to allow me to develop the authentic person that I wanted to become. I began to control what went in my mind, what came out of my mouth. What went in my mind, what came out of my mouth. A lot of people, when they engage me, they always ask me, are you always this positive? You know, after experience all of that negativity and the death and the failure in my life, I found that it was more beneficiary to accept what happened and to learn in those moments what I could bring out of those moments to have a better life, if that's making any sense.
Yes, it does make a lot of sense. You know, you brought up a good point. And I apologize. I'm so sorry to hear about your son. And I can't imagine how it was for you being a dad and losing a son that young. A child is supposed to bury their parents, not the parents burying their children. So I'm really sorry to hear that. I'm sure that took a lot out of you. But you were talking about lesson learned from the death of your son. And from your mentor, what you learn, you can control your attitude. And that seems to play a bigger part in any type of transformation that we have, controlling your attitude. Now, I know a few years back, you lost everything that you started from ground up. That almost took you to a dark place, but you recovered and are now thriving. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, what took place after the death of my son, I went into a function. I was a functioning depressant. I did what was necessary, but I did not. I was not focused on what I wanted to accomplish. I wasn't planning my life. I was living my life. I wasn't planning my life. So after the death of my son, I kind of emotionally shut down. And in that shutting down, I really distanced myself from my wife and my kids. I lost my job at the state. I lost a small real estate business that we were building. I tell everybody that I knew exactly how Job felt all the way to the boils on your body. I made myself so sick that I was so stressful that boils began to proceed out of my skin. That's how depressed I got. And then in that time, we lost everything. So we had to transition from Springfield, Illinois to currently where we live at now in Decatur, Illinois. And I'm a spiritual guy. And I began to ask God what was going on. And he began to tell me he was transitioning my life. He was recreating my mindset. And what he literally did, it was so funny. We didn't have a car. We didn't have a car. So a friend of mine dropped me off at a place to get a job at Target. They was building a new Target here in Decatur. And I sat around for hours waiting to get an interview. I finally got my interview, and getting my interview, got the job, but I didn't have a way home. And you have to, so to kind of give you the distance, it was like a 3-mile walk from where I went to the interview at to home. And it was an ice storm that particular season. So here I am, got to get home. I began to walk in this ice storm. As I'm walking, I'm crying, and I'm like, Lord, why me? Why all of this? And I remember clearly what the Lord said to me. He says, Jesus walked in his ministry. Why not you? I was like, because people would not believe when I tell the story, people would not believe the mental toughness those moments brought to me. Especially when you transition into building a business, dealing with people, you have to have memory pegs of tough times to draw from to push forward. So I'm walking in that rain. I walk home. I'm shivering, freezing. I walk through the door, and the first thing my wife looked at me, she says, what did you do? I said, I got the job. She says, how did you get home? I says, I walked. She's like, You walked in the storm? I was like, honey, forget about the walking. I got the job. I got what I wanted. That was the most, I was so excited about it. And it was a minimum wage job. After going from making $50,000 a year to minimum wage, it was all about, I survived. I now own that moment. So that was the moment that God began to develop me, because what happened was he began to sit me in a corner in a place, and everybody knows these wonderful places. They're called Panera Breads. I would go to Panera and sit in the corner and read my Bible, and I would read books on mindset stuff, and then I would walk to work because my wife would have to go. Say, what do you want me to drop you off at? Oh, just drop me off at Panera. I'll walk over to work. So I did that for about 3 years. But in that 3-year span, I became so mentally conscious and so entrenched in reading that it was unbelievable. And the reason why this is remarkable, because everybody's looking at a guy who graduated from high school with a 1.69 GPA. So when I tell people, when I show children my high school GPA, they cannot believe at the amount of information or the amount of knowledge that I possess. Is because there was a transition that was taking place in me, that I made a commitment. I made a vow to myself that I will not be known to be an ignorant man. I made that vow to myself. So then reading became my outlet to express who I was and who I was becoming. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It definitely makes sense.
So that's how I came out of that dark place. It was through going through that transition of redeveloping my mental mind. I was able to begin to learn the things we talk about, the law of attraction. You attract who you are. Words are thoughts, words are things. So then I began to, one of my favorite scriptures is, as a man thinketh, so is he. I began to recreate my thinking, my way, the pattern of my wavelength of thinking. We don't even realize how powerful our minds are. Mentally, we can send signals out into the earth that will cause things to answer us, and we don't realize it. I mean, you are an answer to a thought that I have. So one day, you know what? I'm gonna be on the talk show, and here I am today. I'm on a talk show, but that was sent out. Our wavelengths connected. You needed someone to be on this talk show. I wanted to be on the talk show. We was on the same radio path, and bam, the law of connection. We connected, and now look what's happening today. And constantly, I learned to constantly do that. And with that type of thinking, it allowed me to transition to where I'm at today. I don't have, what can I say? I don't have failures. I have learning lessons. I have learning lessons. There's something that I need to learn in that moment in my life so I can have a better life. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. There's a quote that sometimes you learn a lesson. Failures really come to you sometimes because those are the lessons that you didn't think you needed to learn. And so that's how I see the world. That's how I see sometimes things that are challenging that come to us.
Yes.
We needed to know that. But at that particular moment, I'm telling you, it is not fun. So let me go back to what you said. You talked about a very challenging time in your life. Being a man, oftentimes it's easier for a woman, for the most part, to express themselves, especially when they're in that dark space called depression. But for so many men, when they are depressed, oftentimes it's even hard for a man to tell somebody they're in a dark place. And that will impact the relationship that person has. What can you share if there's a man out there, or anybody out there for that matter, in that dark space? How do you think that person will help himself or herself to get out of there?
One of the things I always tell men is that we're human. one of my favorite quotes is always, bad things happen to good people. Oftentimes we internalize what happens to us because we're men. I'm supposed to be the protector. I'm supposed to be the provider. We have all these titles, but at the end of the day, I'm still a human being. And a lot of times men don't get in contact with their human self. They're trying to be Superman. They're trying to be all things to all men. But you really got to get in contact with yourself, and you got to know your personal limitations. And then in understanding that, you have to be able to communicate that. And so I always tell men, find another man, a sounding board. Find someone that you can share your life with. God has always made that available to me. He always brings someone who's either been through what I've gone through, know someone that has been through what I've gone through, or just came out of what it is that I've gone through, that I can share my situation or my issues with, And so you got to find that person. Each one of us have one. I call them, I was in the military, I call that person my foxhole buddy. You have to have a foxhole buddy. You can't get through this life by yourself. So if you don't have one, go find one. And you have to be able to trust that person. And I tell people this, man, I'm an acronym guy. I believe in acronyms. And to me, how you determine a relationship that someone is your foxhole buddy, you have to use the acronym of trust. And basically what that means is the relationship under severe trials. That person has to be just as willing to share their trials with you as you are with them. It's a two-way street. And when you find that person, rely on that person. I have several of them that I can call in a drop of a dime in a moment of time and says, hey, this is what's going on with me. What do you think? And how can I? And also too, I also call them my next level people. I never have anybody in my circle that's going to be. They can be empathetic, but they can't be sympathetic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
I don't want sympathy. I want you to be empathetic about my situation, but don't. I understand. I don't need that. I need you to drill down and says, okay, man, how are we gonna make this better? And I call those people. That person has to have that next level mentality. How are you gonna take it to the next level? Yeah, I understand the business closed down. What's next for you? I understand the loan didn't go through. What's another way you can make it happen? You want those kind of men in your life. Is that making sense?
It does make a lot of sense. I believe that we all need such a person in our lives, somebody that you can actually open up to. I think we all go through challenges one time or the other in our lives, but having those kind of core people in our lives make going to those challenges a lot easier. Absolutely. So I'm going to go back and talk about transitioning, unexpected transitioning, so that we can gain the transformation that we deserve.
Right.
Tell me what that means to you and how did that come about?
Life has a way of taking its own path. And a lot of times when it does that, we tend to feel that we did something to make that happen, and it's not necessarily true. For example, how did I come into relationship with you? How did I come into relationship with the Black Belt speakers? I had met Dr. West prior. He invited me down, got me involved in the book. But in that moment, a business that I had been building for over 5 years had come to an end. I mean, I'm not talking about a slow end. I'm talking about like hit the brakes, it's over, door shut, we can't do this anymore type of a deal. In that transition and in that moment, I had to decide what were my lessons learned in that moment. And that's all transitioning is. Transition comes to take us to some place we've never been before, because we've maxed out. I tell people, sometimes we've maxed out. We've seen those people on our jobs. We've seen those people in the workplace. We've seen those business that you're like, man, this business can go to a whole nother level, but that person is stuck between where it can go and where it's at. And they're not willing to take that, I call transition, that leap of faith. And the remarkable thing about it is that we can either take that leap of faith on our own, or we have an amazing Heavenly Father that will make things happen to make it happen. So we will transition, you know. And in the transition, it's not about your failures. It's about your purpose. It's about that next thing, that next string of what I like to call potential that God is trying to bring out of you, that without this pressure, I always tell people, how do you get an oak tree out of an acorn? It gotta die. And the pressure of the earth has to break it, and then that leaf has to push up through the ground to start to grow. Well, that's how it is in transitioning. We have to die to what our minds was used to, so it can shift into something totally new. You in the audience right now, people might not believe this. 5 years ago, I wouldn't have been on this TV show because I was an introvert. I was not an extrovert. I did not openly talk like this. One-on-one, I was good. But if you talking about a crowd of people, I was not so good. But where did I get that introverted behavior from? Because I had built a company for 5 years, and my introverted nature came out, which allowed me to speak to my employees, to give directions, because I wanted to be a strong leader. So that business birthed this man you're seeing today, and then the closing of that business birthed the speaker, the transitional coach you see today, because I learned so many things through my company, through building a business that allows me to help people with transitioning. Because when you're building a business, especially at the magnitude that we did, we constantly went through transitioning. I was constantly coming up with concepts, ideas, and implementing new things, because it went from my front room to 5 different locations. So there was a lot of transitioning that had to take place, and a lot of growth and a lot of pain that had to come forth for the fullness of the vision of that company to do what it did, if that's making sense to you.
Yes, absolutely. So if somebody is out listening right now, what would you tell that person who is actually going through transition now, thinking that it's all over for the person? You know, what would you tell that person as to why and how you were able to transition to be where you are now, changing lives?
Okay, the first thing that I want them to do is I want them to write this down. This is very important. Transition is for transformation. Always remember, transition is for transformation. Transition is to make you become a greater you. The old you has to die for the new you to come alive. So in that, the first thing, there's 3 things that I truly believe that in the transition you need to understand. The first thing is that you have to focus your attention. A lot of times we want to focus on what happened to us and not what happened in us. We want to focus on what happened to us and not what happened in us. Like I just used the example. What happened in me? The business made me confident. It made me an extrovert, not an introvert. It made me find gifts and discover gifts and talents that I didn't have. It made me become a creative writer, because I had to begin to write, vision statements. I had to begin to write, mission statements. I had to begin to write plans and business proposals and read contracts. Transition makes you become a greater you. And you have to transition to that place so you can develop those skills. That's the first thing I would tell them. Know your focus. And focus means, I'm a man of acronyms. Fulfill your course using a system. You got to focus on the system that you're about to engage in. So focus your attention on your learning moments. What did I learn, and how is it going to make me better? Or how is it making me better? Then the second tip I want to say is be aware of your conversation. We never fail we fell forward. So I always tell people, you can't take your issues to someone who has not been through them, or who does not understand them, or who doesn't have the mindset to comprehend them. A lot of times we want to complain down when we should actually be complaining up. We need to go to our mentors and say, hey, this is what, prime example, when the business closed down, Dr. Ruben West, who's over the Black Belt Speakers, I called him and I says, hey, doctor, I called him doc, I said, doc, I'm not going to be able to attend the conference. He immediately said, this is immediately what he said to me. Yes, you can, and yes, you will. What do we need to get you there? He immediately, his mind kicked into solution mode. He was like, hey, listen, I was going to fly down. You can come drive with me, or you can do this, you can do that. I says, well, doctor, let me take a look at some things, and maybe I can come up with a solution. And I did. My solution was, hey, I still have cars that's owned by my transportation company. Hey, I still got a little money left in the bank. Hey, my business partner, he ain't working. The business shut down. He can drive down there with me. So then we had another road trip. And so we just moved down there. But look what happened. Look at the wonderful people. Had I not transitioned well, had my conversation been negative and says, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm such a failure. I got to deal with all these issues, blah, 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 and gave myself all these excuses, I would not have, my conversation would have not caused me to move forward, because I talked to someone who changed my conversations like, yes, you can, yes, you will. Then my brain kicked in. Then my conversation was like, hey, Charles, hey, how would you like to go to North Carolina for a break, man? We need to break away from the business. So much maniac stuff is going on, man. We need to get away, get our minds right. Hey, that's a great idea, man. I'll drive down there with you. Hey, we're going to meet some great people. You get to meet Dr. West. Man, what? We don't know what's going to happen. When we can hang out for a little bit, we just need to get away from the situation. But look what happened. He and I got to meet so many great men who all went through stuff. We got to meet so many great women, and it was such an awesome event that it changed his life and my life because we changed our conversation. The next thing is you got to monitor your thinking. You got to get rid of that stinking thinking. The Bible says, again, as a man thinketh, so is he. We got to be transformed. We are transformed by the renewing of our mind. I tell people our mind is like a computer. You gotta erase some of that stuff. You gotta give it a down. You gotta wipe it. You gotta clean it and give it a mental upgrade. I tell people you're gonna be known by I can tell more about you by the 5 books you read and the 5 friends you hang around. You introduce me to your 5 best friends, I'm gonna tell you who you are, who you're gonna be in the next 10 years. You introduce me to 5 books you read, I'm gonna tell you how you think just by the information that's in your mind. So with those 3 things, you can make a great transition. Number 1, just focus your attention. You got to get focused. You got to know what happened. What happened to you? Nothing happened to you. It happened for you, and you got to move through that. And secondly, you got to be aware of your conversation. You got to speak your expectations of what you want to happen next or what's going to occur next. One of the things that happened to me is that I went from running one business. Now I've created 3 other businesses. I went from one industry, now operating in 3 other industries. Why? Because I changed my conversation. I was like, man, there's some other things that I can do now because I'm freed up. What are those things? Where are my gifts, talents, and abilities most useful at? And we moved into that. Thirdly is I monitor my thinking. I only talk to those who are going to expose me to a higher level of thinking. Using I think there's it says that we only use 10% of our brain energy. 10%. I told somebody that 2018, I'm gonna try to use 25%. I'm gonna use 25% of my mental wave. I'm going to think myself into wealth with action behind it. Now I'm not gonna I'm gonna have to There'll be some action behind it, but man, I'm going to think myself. I just think about wealthy stuff, because as a man thinketh, so is he. You know, so that person that's out there that's listening to this, that person that might play this back, you have to become a great thinker. A great thinker.
Awesome. Everyone, we're still talking to our guest star today, Anthony Cherry, talking about how to embrace unexpected transition to gain transformation in your business and in your life. Going back to Anthony again. Anthony.
Yes, ma'am.
You talked about transition, and when I met you at North Carolina, like I said, I couldn't believe it. And you were telling your story, but to see where you are now, it's really amazing. You have done great things for yourself. You're going out now, speaking and impacting lives, both with the people that you work with that are underneath you and the public in general. So what is one thing that if somebody is listening now, they're at the place where they're trying to do something, however, they are not quite sure. What would you do as far as clearing the ground for them to get started? What would you offer that person?
I would simply say this: do it. You have to do it. It's in you to do it. If you thought it, thoughts are things. So if you thought that idea, that concept, you thought about that book, you thought about going to help those children, whatever it is, you know, started a non-for-profit organization. I think it was Miles Monroe who said this quote, and I hold this quote dear to my heart. He said, the richest places in the world are not our oil fields, oil refineries, not our diamond mines, not our coal mines. The richest places in the world are our cemeteries, because there's books that were not written, ideas that were not shared, businesses that were not built, dreams that were unfulfilled. Do not waste your time trying to figure out how it's going to happen. Our job is only to do it. Get at it, get after it, and all that other stuff will find itself to you. I tell people all the time. God only hits moving targets.
Say that again.
God only hits moving targets.
Makes a lot of sense to me.
Listen, faith without work is dead. So you have to move in faith. You just got to get, if it's just making a phone call to connect with somebody, if it's just going to the library and doing some research, if it's just making a vision board, if it's just, writing down the basics of your idea, if it's just something minute. I think it was J.W. Marriott that says this: small things make big things happen. Small things make big things happen. We always get overwhelmed by the bigness of our dream, but it's like Steve Covey said, you got to start with the end in mind, but then you got to regenerate and go back and start where you're at and then move forward, because that's your plan. That's your plan of action, and you move toward that. You know, my grandmother used to always say this, and grandparents used to say some crazy stuff and be like, oh, why do you say that? You know, ask you questions. Well, baby, how do you eat an elephant? Well, grandma, duh, I've never seen an elephant. I don't know. Well, you eat it one bite at a time. Life is lived one bite at a time. And you got to take that bite. And most people are afraid. Why? Because it's something new. That's why you need to do it, because it's a new experience. You need that experience to grow, to birth that new you in you. It's a shock factor. You got to do it. You just got to go forward. I mean,
that's right. The only way to get something started is to get started on something. The only way to get something started is to get started on something. Absolutely.
I got to write that one
now
down.
that we're coming to the end of this interview, do you have anything to share with your audience? I know you have something to offer. So give out your contact information so that audience can contact you and give out other information that you have.
What I would like to offer to everybody is a 30-minute strategic mental conversation to help you get your mind right around your idea and put together the plan of action. I can be reached at, you can inbox me on Messenger at Anthony D. Cherry Sr., or you can text me at 217-619-1426 with your name and phone number and email address, and I'll reach out to you and we can set that up.
Well, thank you so much, Anthony. I really appreciate you coming, your time, and hopefully I will see you again in the next conference for Black Belt speakers. Hopefully I will see you, and if your wife is coming as well, I'll get to meet your wife as well. So thank you so much, and thank you for your time. Audience, please remember that to enter and register for the upcoming, take the opportunity to register for the upcoming Tele-Summit that will be on January 27th, beginning at 9 a.m. Anthony, thank you so much.
You're welcome.